Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and just an honor to stand before you. This is a two-part series that we're doing, and I told you in the first session. I know several were not here, but I tried to do in the first session a little bit about what Tracy's doing over. The ladies, she's getting 2 sessions, and I tried to do what she's doing in 2 in about 30 minutes. That was kind of crazy, but she's talking about what we have tried to develop down in West Palm Beach for our children's Bible class curriculum from age 3 to grade 5. But I thought it'd be beneficial to take the first session with some of the men to talk about it, so that there's no elders over there, there's no Bible class deacon coordinators over there, and so I wanted anybody who would be in here during those sessions to maybe benefit from just hearing about. I didn't say this in the first session, but we were trying to, and when it came to our children's education, try to think a little bit outside of the box to get our kids inside of the Word. The main thing was keeping them inside of the Word, but we were willing to think a little bit of outside the box, and those who are here in this first session know that when you talk about doing away with the 13-week quarter system, some of us had to go forward on Sunday when we even suggested doing away with the 13-week quarter system, and we had special elders meetings, and they prayed over us. When you start breaking some of those molds that are there, but here's the deal: when you start breaking some of those molds, then it's like, hey, wait a minute. If we don't have to do 13-week quarters, that means we could, and all of a sudden your possibilities open up a little bit more. And the whole point of all of that was to say, let's make sure we're doing the very best we can do in our Bible class program for our kids, for our teens, for our adults, and not allow artificial barriers that we have created. Well, we can't do that because of this. Well, hang on a second. If your congregation will have more folks come out on Tuesday night than they will on Wednesday night, then what's going on? What's going to work best? Again, we said in the first session, we're not talking about doctrine. We're not talking about not teaching sound doctrine. That is an absolute, and that cannot be changed. But we're talking about the expedient of Bible classes. How can we use that in the very best way? 100 years ago, we didn't have air conditioning in buildings. Whose idea was it ever to put air conditioning in buildings? That was crazy. We did it for centuries without air conditioning. Why all of a sudden are we going to bring air conditioning in? Thank the Lord. That somebody said we're going to do that. That's kind of just a real quick recap. But this session, we're not talking about the children's Bible education. This session, mainly what I want to share with you, and I'm going to give you this handout here in just a second. But mainly what I want to share with you is a 10-class teacher training session, not for kids classes, but for teens and adults, that we have used a few times with some success. And so as we talk about, training teachers, as we talk about being teachers in the Lord's church, I want to share that with you. And so this handout that I'm going to give to all of you, I kind of previewed it in the last session, but I also said in the last session that I've been in enough elders meetings to know that if I give you 40 pages now, you're just going to spend the whole time looking through the 40 pages, and you're not going to be with me. So we covered about the first 5 pages of this 40-something pages in the last session. So we're gonna rapidly go through the rest of it, and there's by no means can we possibly cover everything that's in here, and by no means do I think that this is the very best of what you need to do. But when Neil and Hiram called and asked us to conduct a teacher workshop, I thought, okay, what in the world? I don't know how to do that. But I thought there would be some helpful things that we have done down in West Palm Beach that I could share with you. So if I can get a couple guys maybe to pass these out, and if you can just go to page 6, if you'll meet me on page 6, that would thank you. Let me get something for you. I got more with these guys. That'll be enough.
Oh, okay. Okay. Anyone else over there?
Thank you. I know there were some folks here in the first session, and I told them I would give these to them at the end, and then I didn't even have them out. So if you know somebody who was here in the first session who was did not get one, then feel free to take one to somebody who was here before and did not get one. So meet me on page 6 if you would. We've covered the first 5 in the previous session. And by the way, I'll forget otherwise. Go to where is it? Go to page 29. I'll forget otherwise. Okay. If you were in the first session, this will make sense to you. If you weren't in the first session, it won't. But page 29 gives you a sample of the lesson plan that we give these out in color, but I was too cheap for this and I made it in black and white. But so the next 4 pages after page 29, that's a sample lesson plan from our Stepping into the Bible program. You'll flip over a few pages, and those pages aren't numbered, but you get to page 34 where it'll say Appendix B up at the top. The next 8 pages where you have semester 1, semester 2, semester 3. That's the 280 lessons. So again, if you weren't here in the first session, that won't make sense. But these pages that look like this is the breakdown of our children's Bible education from age 3 to grade 5. 16 semesters, 20 lessons in each one of those semesters. But that'll give you kind of the title, the scripture reference, memory verses that we use for that, as well as just a sample lesson. So that's I'll forget to point you to that, but I promised the first session that would be there. So. Teacher selection. Is it needful to have a teacher selection process? The Bible says that everyone needs to teach. Is that true? Go to all the world, preach the gospel to every creature, right? Go therefore, make disciples of all the nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Doing what? Teaching them to observe. Do all of us have a responsibility to teach? Yes. Okay. I know that was a trick question. Everybody needs to teach. Qualified, second point, not everybody needs to teach in a classroom. So, how do you figure that out? Not everybody needs to teach, but not everybody needs to be in a classroom with children or with teens or with adults. Well, you look on page 6 where we are, and you see under Roman numeral number 2 that elders have a responsibility. Elders have a responsibility towards the flock. You see there under letter C that elders have a responsibility to take care, to take heed, to shepherd, to exhort and convict, to stop the mouths of false teachers, to watch and to guard the flock. That's laid upon the shoulders of our shepherds. And so it is my conviction that the elders need to have some kind of process by which to evaluate and select individuals that they will allow to teach in a congregation. I do not believe that it is wise to just allow anyone to step into a classroom and to teach without knowing who they are, without knowing where they're from, knowing what they believe in certain things. Some people would say, well, wait a minute, we just need to trust each other. Okay, we need to trust each other, but elders have a responsibility to the flock. Elders cannot afford to let someone go into a classroom and teach something that is not according to sound doctrine. And so down under Roman numeral number 3, letter F, the elder needs to know some things from potential teachers, some kind of questionnaire. Number 1, they need to know, does this person even want to teach? Number 2, are they going to take it seriously? Number 3, where do they fit best? They fit best teaching preschool, elementary. Number 4, they need to understand, the elders need to know, what do these people believe just about basic Christian evidences, about fundamental doctrines, about some divisive issues. You see some examples here about some moral issues. If you go to the last 2 pages of your handout, back on the page, whatever that is, page 45 will give you the appendix cover sheet. But the 2 pages after page 45 is just a possible teacher questionnaire. There are a million different ways to do this. So don't take this and say this is what David said is what we've got to use. David didn't say any of that. David said you can do better than whatever's on these last 2 pages. But the elders need to know what people believe, what people think about before they ever let them into a classroom to teach. And so there's some things that you could add to this, that you could change on here. don't misunderstand. This is not meant to be a creed. It's not meant to say these are the only things that matter to the elders. You know, you can't ask every question under the sun, but you need to have some kind of questionnaire, or I know some that do more like an interview process. Instead of filling out a piece of paper, they just sit down and talk to them. Whatever the process is, there needs to be a process.
Right.
There needs to be some kind of thing that says we are selective about who we let into a classroom to teach. Now, if they don't answer here's the thing, if they don't answer some question right, it's not like, okay, red, X, all right, we don't want you, next. It's a teaching opportunity, not for them in a classroom, but for you with them. Say, hey, hang on a second. You put down that you think that, that the days of creation were 1,000 years long each. You know what, can we sit down and talk about that? And all of a sudden, if you cover that, maybe you have another teacher, if that's the only thing that's of concern. And so, don't just say, no, red X, they didn't qualify. If you do that, you're not going to have a lot of teachers, perhaps. And so, teaching opportunities would avail there. But on page 7, what I want to share with you real quick, as far as teacher preparation goes, is just a 10-week, a 10-class training session that we have used, not for kids classes. We do different teacher training for our kids classes that are specifically designed through our Step Into the Bible program. But this is for individuals that we're looking to be teachers of our teens, junior high, senior high, or adults. And what we've done with this is we've done this over a period of 10 weeks. For us, we've done it at 5 o'clock on Sundays. David didn't say you have to do it on 5 o'clock on Sundays. I'm just saying that's when we did. You can find the time that works best for you. But we have our evening worship is at 6 o'clock, so we would meet for 45 minutes with individuals that we had invited to come to this teacher training session for a period of 10 weeks. And here's what we cover. Class number 1, what page is it? Page number 7. So class number 1, we just say, what is teaching at Palm Beach Lakes all about? What are we trying to do? And so we just kind of give them an overview of being a teacher at Palm Beach Lakes. But what we wanted to hone in on, page 7, middle of the page, Roman numeral number 3, some fundamental principles for teaching at this congregation. Number 1, if you're going to teach at this congregation, we want you to teach. We want you to teach. Some people go into a classroom and they go in with they've written out a bunch of questions, and we're just going to have questions and answers. I'm going to ask questions, and you're going to give answers, and that's going to be the class that day. Nothing wrong with asking questions, nothing wrong with people giving answers. But if that's all that's happening in a classroom, there's no teaching happening in a classroom. There's just people talking. And some want it to just be discussion, similar to question and answer, but everybody gets to have their say. Or maybe it is they come in. If you do this, I'm just trying to broaden our horizons here a little bit, okay? Some folks will walk in and they'll get there and they'll take the marker and they're going to write down 20 verses on the board, and then they're going to say, okay, would you read the first verse? Good. What do you think about that? Would you read the second verse? What do you think about that? Would you? And so we read the verse. Are we teaching the Bible? The Bible's being read. The Bible's being is front and center in the Bible class, but the teacher's not teaching. Whole thing is there anything wrong with people reading Bible verses in the Bible class and making comments? Don't misunderstand me, okay? What I'm saying at the top of page 8 is that we want our teachers to teach. That's harder work than just writing some verses on the board. That's harder work than just coming up with 10 questions I'm going to ask the class. And so maybe that's why we gravitate towards the easier route. But we want our teachers to go into the class. We want them to teach. Letter B on page 8, so that it's not misunderstood, we want them to teach the Bible. We are not asking them to go in and to share what they had read in Reader's Digest that week. We're not asking them, I don't understand this at all. We're not asking them to walk in and show some Andy Griffith episodes and to use that as the basis of their class. I'm at the top of the list of people who love Andy Griffith, all right? And I'm at the top of the list saying, hey, there's some great lessons, life lessons that can be learned from that. But in our Bible classes, at least in our congregation, we want the teachers to teach, and we want them to teach the Bible. That's going to be front, and that's going to be what's going to be, you know, not saying that you can't bring in some video of something that's going on and use it as some illustration for the class, but we want, look at number 4, right in the center of the page. We want to take people back to the Bible and into the Bible. We're not wanting our teachers to come up with something new and interesting. Oh, innovative. We've never thought about this before. I've never thought about this before. Just get into the book and teach the book and let the book tell us what we need to know. And I love what Peter says, to stir up your pure minds by way of remembrance. You know, there's a song. What's the song? I love to tell the story. It's verse number 4. Those who know it best seem hungry and thirsty to hear it like the rest. You know, we walk into a class, well, you know, they already know this stuff. Well, okay, who cares? Peter says, I'm going to stir up your mind by way of reminder. And so even for those who know it already, I don't have to come up with something new for that. Every generation needs what every generation before has known. So we want them to teach the Bible, to build faith, letter C. We want them to make the class applicable. So class 1 is, here's what teaching at this congregation is all about. You design class 1 to be what, and I'm not saying you have to use these 10, but what is teaching in your congregation like? Page number 9. Is this page number 9? Class number 2. How do you become an effective teacher? You got to have a deep reverence for God and for His Word. You got to be a Bible student. You got to be an example of faithfulness outside the class. Get down to Roman number 6. If you're going to be an effective teacher, you need to be soberly reminded of your responsibility. If you're going to be an effective Bible class teacher, you need to know that when you walk into that class, you are teaching the most precious of all subjects ever, the Bible. And you are teaching the most precious of all God's creation, souls. You're teaching the Bible to souls that have been created in the image of God, and you are responsible for what you teach. And so you need to teach it faithfully. Romans 7, go to page 10. You need to only teach what fits you. Don't teach what you don't know. There was a brother I knew who was a part of our congregation, and he went to another congregation, moved out of our area to another state, was at this other congregation, and they came up to him and they said, would you, and this was after several years he had been there, it wasn't the first week, it was after several years he had been there, but they walked up to him and said, he had taught life of Christ, he had taught about, Israel and the history of Israel. They come up to him and said, would you teach the book of Revelation? And he said, that's not my best book. He said, I really haven't studied through the book of Revelation much. And they said, that's okay. We still want you to teach it. You can't teach. Shouldn't teach. Let me say it that way. Shouldn't teach what you don't know. And walking into a Bible class should be the first time that you're studying through the book of Revelation. Now, that's an extreme example, right? That's out there. We always say the teacher learns the most. So you're always going to learn more than the people in your class are going to learn. And whenever I'm teaching, even through 2 Corinthians right now, I love diving into it and just learning it as we're going. But you can't teach what you don't know. Some letter C, some texts don't need to be taught by certain teachers, like the book of Revelation, but some topics don't need to be taught by certain teachers. If somebody's not equipped to deal with marriage, divorce, and remarriage, they don't need to be going in and teaching So they need to teach what fits them. Roman number 9 on that page. Only teach what fits the students in the class. You're going to teach teenagers a little bit differently, on a different level than you're going to teach the adults. You're going to teach new members differently than what you're going to teach some seasoned members. So know who's going to be in your class. Only teach Roman number 10. Only teach what you can make your own. Don't just walk in, and I'm not telling this to you, I guess I should, but we're telling our teachers, don't just walk in there, open the class workbook that you've been given and just read through the class workbook. Make it your own. Get into a deep study of it. And then number 11, realize each class is important. Even if there's only 3 or 4 people in your class, don't shortchange them. They're in your class. And realize that you need to give them the very best that you've got, And number 12, don't forget your goal. I love Colossians 1 and verse 28. Warning every man, teaching every man that we may present every man perfect, complete in Christ Jesus. Your goal as a teacher is not to, well, I've got 45 minutes to fill. No, you've got 45 minutes to make it the best you can on teaching the Bible. And so remember, your goal is to help deepen love for God, strengthen faith, and to present us perfect in Christ. Class number 3. So what is it like to teach here? How do you become an effective teacher? How do you put together a lesson? Class number 3 on page 11. This is just some general principles that we give for preparing Bible lessons. And I'm ripping through this with you, but we try to take our time and go through this. Obviously, we pray. Number 2, we let the Bible explain itself before ever going to the Bible commentaries. We need to teach that not just to teachers. Sometimes people just run to what does Brother so-and-so say about this? Well, we need to be more concerned about what Brother Paul said about it than what Brother Guy in Woods said about it. Those are two different men. And so what did the inspired brother say about this before what did the uninspired brother say? And so obviously we tell them, number 3, keep it in context. Number 4, consult multiple reliable translations. Number 5, use Bible reference works. Okay, good. I thought I had more PowerPoint. Good. I was more general up here. So use reference works, and then you get to number 6. Then you go and search out some good, faithful writers. And the same thing on number 7 on page 12. Hopefully, we are providing our teachers. Most teachers are not just going to be told, hey, we need you to teach 1st and 2nd Kings. Go for it. Most of the time we're going to provide them with some sort of resource to use, and so we want them to make sure that that's a guide that they are following as they go through that. But encourage them, number 8, to thoroughly study it, to put real effort into it, number 9, and number 10, to prepare in advance. Don't just walk into a class unprepared, or don't just run home, read through it at dinner on Wednesday night, and then walk into class on Wednesday night and try to teach that class. Give it your very best. There's a whole lot more in here, obviously, that we're kind of skipping over, but we're trying to give them just general principles. All right, go to page number 14. Page number 14, we get a little more specific on the types of classes. If you look on page 14, 15, and 16, just look at the difference, 14, 15, and 16. Class 4 is, here's how we're talking about in Class 4, preparing a textual study. Class 5, topical study. Class 6, a character study. And so we're walking them through just some steps on preparing these different kinds of lessons. Obviously, they've got the general principles from Lesson 3, and then some more specific ideas here in Class 4. But if you look at the top of page 14, see where it says Class 4, preparing a textual study for a Bible class lesson. And then you see the parentheses right kind of underneath that, where it says, see Lesson 8. Maybe I should have said Class 8. See Lesson 8 for assignment to hand out. Hold your finger here, go over to page 20. What we do at the end of class number 4, we give them a handout. And we tell them, in 4 weeks, we want you to come back. Actually, page 21 is the handout that we give them at the end of class number 4. But we tell them, in 4 weeks, we want you to come back with a textual lesson. So, in class 4, we're talking about, here's how you prepare a textual lesson. We go through some processes, talk about how to put it together, but it's not just, oh, okay, that's a nice idea. We give them this assignment at the end of class, and we tell them, okay, in 4 weeks, you're going to come back. And so, what class is that? Number 8. So in class number 8, we're done teaching in class number 7. So in class number 8, we allow the students in the class to go around and say, here's my textual study. Here's what, and we give them a whole lot of chapters. We just want them to pick a chapter, and they don't have to do that list, but pick a chapter and do a textual study of this. Tell us what's your title for your class. What was your text? What's your outline? What are your main points that you are bringing out of this lesson? What is your application? that you're giving your daily application. And so you got 2 or 3 minutes. You know, everybody's got 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, what's yours? Okay, and so they're just sitting at their tables. We're just going around, and so we'll spend that whole class 8. You're talking about what's your, and they're supposed to bring copies for everybody else in the room to be able to have a copy of their lesson. All right, so go to page 14 or 15. Sorry, page 15. Same thing. So class number 5 is about a topical study. So we give them some guidelines on preparing a topical study, boy, there's more in there. Number 3, narrow down to a subject that is manageable. Don't walk into a class with too big of a subject. Number 4 on page 15, let the Bible draw its own conclusions. Don't try to draw a conclusion and go to the Bible to prove it. Let the Bible draw its own conclusions. But then the whole concept and topical study of gathering relevant passages, handling them accurately. So go to page 22. Hold your finger here. Go to page 22, and you see again, we give them a handout, and the handout's actually on page 23, but page 22 is the instructions. So page 23 is the handout they walk out of class 5 with. So they've got homework for these weeks. And we say, okay, in 4 weeks, during class number 9, we're going to do the same thing. We want you to pick one of these topics. We want you to narrow it down to a manageable focus. We want you to go through and study it, organize it into 2 to 5 main points. We are big on thesis statements down there. We have a leadership training class for our kids during the summer, same thing. We just drill thesis statements with them. But to bring us a skeleton outline and what's your application. So again, class 9, we're not going to be teaching, we're just going to be listening to what are their lessons they have developed, or at least the skeleton of it. And then come back to page 16. And on page 16 is preparing a character study, a Bible character. So on page 16, we encourage them to approach this as a combination of a textual and a topical study. Topical from the standpoint of you're going through the Bible to find where's their character mentioned throughout the Bible, but textual from the standpoint of we want you to dig into a text and develop it from the text. Number 6 on page 16, the questions who, when, where, what, why that you just ask to find out the details. Look on page 17. Again, a thesis statement. Number 8, choose a key verse about what's a key verse about this character. You know, if you're teaching about Paul, you know, for me to live as Christ or whatever, you know, what's a key verse about this character. Number 9 on page 17, compose an outline. So we tell them what we want their outline to look like. We want you in your outline, number 1, what's the context? Tell us, where does this character fit in the Bible? Is he during the patriarchal age? Or tell us, where does he fit? All right, now that you've told us the context, tell us about the character. What are the main points of interest from his life? What's there? And then the convergence is, okay, we've learned about where he fits and what he did. What does that have to do with me? How does that converge with my life today? Help us to walk, number 10, help us to walk and talk with this character. So go over to page 24 and 25, and over there at the end of class number 7, you will see that they are again given this homework, and the homework is on page 25. This is the handout that they are given, and it's just like this, except it doesn't say quick page 25 at the bottom of it, but this is it that we give them and say we want you to work on this. So over those next several weeks, they've got a lot of homework that they are working on developing these lessons because we want them prepared when they're given a task to walk into a classroom. We want them prepared to do so. Not just to say, oh, brother so-and-so volunteered to teach. Great. Here's a booklet that we got. Here's a Wendell Winkler booklet on the Christian and his influence. Would you teach this to? Okay, great. Well, if we've never trained him how to develop a lesson, you know, anybody can walk in with Brother Winkler's book and take it and teach it, and teach it something better than whatever that he would come, anything better than what David would come up with. But Brother Winkler's got too much stuff in those chapters, and you got to figure out how are you going to take the too much stuff and make it fit you and fit them that you're talking to. And so there's work there. All right? All right. Page 18. I know I'm zipping through these. I'm just trying to give you an overview. So How do you teach here? What does that look like? How do you become an effective teacher? Here's how you develop lessons. All right. How do you present? How do you teach? And so you'll notice throughout all of these, everything starts with prayer. I have not mentioned that, and I'm not trying to minimize it, but we encourage much prayer in the study and in the preparation process. We tell them, number 4, that nervousness is natural and should be expected. We tell that to all of them. We had our Ladies' Day Thursday night, two days ago, Thursday night, and one of our teenage girls, I guess, read scripture. I didn't know she was going to read some scripture, but she came into the dinner where the guys were serving afterwards. She says, "I was so nervous." I said, "Good. You're supposed to be. That's a good sign." You know, sometimes we think, "I'm nervous. I can't do this. I'm too nervous." If you're not nervous, something's wrong with you. You know, that is a natural response. And if you think you're so good that you don't get nervous anymore, you're not that good. And so, you know, I try to encourage that old teenage girl, good. And so use it. Let it thrive on it. Number 5, be enthusiastic. When you're a teacher, be enthusiastic about what you're teaching. If you get up there and say, make a habit of getting to class on time, which means early, and you really should begin with prayer. I mean, okay, but you're going to lose. What are we talking about? We're talking about the Bible. If you love it, they'll love it. You know, there's some sports fans that I've been around that I almost like their team because they like their team so much. They're like, well, no, I can't like your team. But they're so driven. I'm like, you almost convinced me, almost out-persuaded me, but no, I can't go down that road with you. But because they're so excited about it, they get me excited almost about it. So what about the Bible? You know, if we're excited, if we're going to love it, that needs to come across in our teaching. They got to we tell our teachers, you got to be in class on time. Nobody's Neil, nobody's Hiram. You got to use your notes. Neil and Hiram don't use notes, but we tell our teachers, you need to use your notes. Don't just go in there and wing it. You know, you've done preparation, use it. Welcome the comments, welcome the questions, number 9 there, but don't let questions and comments control your class. Don't let it deviate where you're going in your class. You've got to maintain control. There's a whole lot more there. Page 19. Don't teach what you don't know. We've talked about that. Don't raise questions that you can't answer. And don't leave questions unanswered to the best of your ability. We tell them, number 12 on the top of page 19, especially those who are younger, I guess, lean on the mature, knowledgeable Christians in your class. If a question gets asked you don't know the answer to, the first thing you ought to say is, I don't know. Second thing is to look around the class and say, okay, is there anybody in here that might? You know, the first time I ever taught an adult Bible class, I was 16 years old. I don't know that that's a good, wise thing to do. But we had a congregation about 50 miles west of us who was in between preachers, a smaller congregation. And so once I turned 16 and was able to drive, I was put on that rotation, going out there and preaching. Well, what was involved on Sunday morning was teaching the Bible class and preaching. Well, preaching was no problem, right? Because when you're preaching, you're the only one talking. You know, well, it's supposed to be, you know, you're the only one talking. But teaching a Bible class, well, that's a horse of a different color. And so I was like, yeah, but, you know, and of course, who's going to ask a 16-year-old a question anyway? But, you know, I'm just like, what if somebody asks a question, I don't know how to answer. And one of the gentlemen who had been going out there for a lot of years, an older gentleman, he said, don't worry. Just, if somebody asks a question, just say, that's a good question. Brother Williams, what do you think about that question? Because he said, Brother Williams is going to be sitting in the back right of the auditorium, and he used to be a preacher, and he's going to be your best friend in that Bible class. And so now, it may not be Brother Williams. There's some Sister Williams that have offered a whole lot of wisdom in Bible classes. You know, I won't mention her by name, but we had one sister down there. Well, we've had multiple, but there's just one that's just sticking in my mind right this minute. Whenever she'd raise her hand when I was teaching a class, I shouldn't say this, it's being recorded, right? I shouldn't say this part. Sometimes there's people who raise a hand when I'm teaching a Bible class, and I ignore them. It's like, oh, well, we were running out of time. I know we got 25 minutes left. We're just running out of time. You know, I don't say that out loud. That's in the head, right? So, I mean, sometimes somebody will raise a hand and you're like, you know, but when this sister, whenever she raised her hand, I would almost stop mid-sentence because she knew the book and I knew what, she didn't raise her hand often. You know, she wasn't one of those sisters that raised her hand every 10 minutes every class. But I knew whatever she was going to say, boy, it was just going to add to the class. And so, I know you guys have been in that same place. Last thing we tell them, wrap up the class in a nice package. Make sure they're walking away with some take-home lessons, some applications, and they know what they're doing. So that is our teaching, our 10-week training class that we go through. Real quick, go to page 26. I don't have time to deal with these last pages. We only have about 4.5 minutes here, but let me just mention a couple things to you. Teacher evaluation, I think, is important. We started on page 6 with teacher selection. If it's important to make sure you're putting the right people in the class, would it be important to make sure you're keeping the right people in the class? Sometimes somebody looked good and sounded good, but when we got into the real situation, like, oh, okay, this really isn't a good fit. Maybe it's the age group, maybe it's the person, maybe there's something else that we can get involved in doing, but becoming, while some Bible class teachers would say this is not true, becoming a Bible class teacher is not a lifetime appointment. It shouldn't be anyway, right? Now, I know there's some ladies who would say, I've been teaching cradle roll in this class for the last 25 years and I'm going to be doing it for the rest of my life. I know that's the case because nobody else wants to teach cradle roll. But it shouldn't be a lifetime appointment. There should be an evaluation process that is used, and even involving going in, sitting in the class with some questions that are listed down here on the Roman numeral number 3 to say, is this teacher doing well? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What are some things, would they be better off in a different situation, or do they need to be here at all? Page 27, a whole lot more in evaluation, but just some thoughts there you can look over. Page 27 is teacher appreciation. I will admit to you, we do not do this often enough. As confession time, we do not do this often enough, and we're trying to do better. We need to do, collectively, we need to do a good job at showing appreciation to our Bible class teachers. Up here at the top, it says it's been suggested that Bible class teachers are, number 1, some of the most overworked people in the church, and number 2, some of the most underappreciated people in the church. I don't know if that's true, but they ought to be the people. When Romans chapter 12 says to outdo one another in showing honor, in the ESV, we ought to outdo ourselves in showing honor to these people who are teaching our Bible classes. And you see under number 2, right in the middle of the page, showing appreciation is good for the teachers. When a teacher is showing appreciation, when there's a banquet for them of some kind, and they're given some kind of a small gift, and that's mentioned down at the bottom, and there's words of appreciation mentioned by them, that's just like a shot in the arm. They'll overlook all sorts of other, things and say, boy, that just made me feel I'm good for another. But if we don't show them appreciation, then they get really discouraged. Then it's like, why am I doing this? Nobody really cares. So it's good for the teachers. It's good for the church. Gratitude should be one of those things that's just contagious. And maybe showing gratitude and appreciation to our teachers help to get more people encouraged and desirous to be teachers as well. And so that ought to characterize us. So under number 3 there, showing appreciation is simple. Roman numeral number 3. We ought to do it publicly. From the pulpit, preachers, we ought to do it publicly. Periodically, we ought to praise our teachers. Parents ought to do it. Letter C, elders ought to do it. Short handwritten notes. When a new quarter starts, it's a great time. To those who just finished teaching, handwritten note from Mel. Thank you so much for it. It's 2 or 3 sentences. It'll take you 5 minutes to write a thank you. Teachers who are coming in and teach, thank you for volunteering to teach grades 3 and 4. You're a blessing to this congregation. You're in my prayers. 3 or 4 minutes, a couple sentences to a teacher can mean a lot. And then letter D, just an annual, and I would encourage it to be an annual teacher appreciation banquet where the teachers are not the ones involved in planning it. Sometimes that's hard because the teachers are the most the most involved members in the congregation. But don't have the teachers planning their own appreciation. I mean, maybe that's what they want, but have it be some other folks who are planning it to show them appreciation. It is truly, number 28, a blessing to be a Bible class teacher. The blessings far outweigh any excuses that we could offer towards it. I hope that when we pick up this book and we walk into a room to teach it, that we recognize the value of what we're holding and the value of the people that we're talking to, the eternal value of these things, and we never take it lightly. I hope something that we've talked about today in either one of these sessions has been helpful to you, and if you can take any of this and improve upon it and do even better with it, to God be the glory in all of that. Thank you all very much.